بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
الحمد لله حمدا كثيرا طيبا مباركا فيه كما يحب ربنا ويرضى. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله الناصح الأمين. اللهم صل على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين ومن تمسك بسنته إلى يوم الدين. ثم أما بعد. Alhamdulillah, we continue going over the tremendous book that is authored by the Fadilat al-Shaykh al-Allama Shaykh Salih al-Fawzan. That book, which is entitled Tanbihat ala Ahkam Takhtassu bil Mu'minat. That book, which is entitled Attention to some of the rules and regulations specific to the believing women. We are still on the chapter that deals with different aspects of what a woman can and cannot do upon her menses. And we have reached the portion of the section where the Fadilat al-Shaykh, Shaykh Salih al-Fawzan, he mentions, he says, يحرم على الحائض اللبث في المسجد, that it is not permissible, or that it is impermissible. It is impermissible for a woman who is upon her menses to stay for long periods of time inside of the Masjid. To stay for long periods of time inside of the Masjid. And as a reminder, again, as with the issues of ikhtilaf, we'll try to bring various opinions, or to show you each side of this particular issue, and why each side says what, so that you will have some informed information and thus be able to come to a informed decision. So Shaykh Fawzan, he says that it is not permissible for a woman who is on her menses to stay for long periods of time inside of the Masjid. And this is due to the statement that has been collected by Imam Abu Dawood rahmatullah alayhi, and others from the people of knowledge, others from the scholars of hadith. In any event, this is the statement that says, إني لا أحل المسجد للحائض ولا لجنب. That verily I do not make it permissible for the woman who's on her menses, nor for the one who's in a state of sexual impurity, to enter into the Masjid. To enter into the Masjid. The Shaykh, he goes on and he says, as there also is another narration with a different wording that is collected by Imam Ibn Majah and others, and that is the statement, إن المسجد لا يحل لحائض ولا لجنب. that the masjid, it is not permissible for the woman on her menses, nor for those who are in the state of sexual impurity. And again, this was collected by Imam Ibn Majah. So this is what those scholars who deem it as being impermissible for the women to enter into the masjid, these are from the proofs that they utilize to come to this conclusion. These are from the proofs that they utilize to come to this conclusion. And that is with regard to staying in the masjid for long periods of time. The Shaykh, he says, to show us another aspect of this issue, and that is not staying in the masjid for long periods of time, but what if the one upon a menses will go into the masjid for short periods of time? The Shaykh, he says, وَيَجُوزُ لَهَا مُرُورٌ مِنَ الْمَسْجِدِ مِنْ غَيْرِ لَبْثٍ لِلْحَدِيثِ الْآعِشَةِ. He said it is permissible for her to pass through the masjid, right, and to enter into the masjid for short periods of time, due to the hadith of Aisha radiyallahu ta'ala anha. That due to this hadith of Aisha, then it is permissible for the woman to pass through the masjid and not stay there for long periods of time. قالت, and she said, our mother Aisha, قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم, that the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم, he said, ناوليني الخمرة من المسجد. He said, give me the mat from the masjid. Give me the mat, get the mat from the masjid for me. فقلت, our mother Aisha, she said, so I said, إني حائض. So I said, verily I am upon my menses. I am upon my menses. To which the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, إن حيضتك ليست بيدك. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said that verily your menses is not inside of your hands. Your menses is not inside of your hands. So from this standpoint, they were, or is an indication from here, that the woman upon her menses, she is allowed to enter into the masjid for short periods of time, and we have a proof of that. Now, so I want to slow down a little bit, and I want everyone to write this in their notes so that it is no confusion. Firstly, is the issue of the woman on her menses going into the masjid for short periods of time. She goes in the masjid for short periods of time, right? She doesn't stay there for a long time. As regards to this issue, then we have from the ulama those who say it is permissible based upon this hadith, because in this hadith our mother Aisha radiyallahu ta'ala anha, she went into the masjid while she was on her menses, but because she was going in there to retrieve something, then it's understood that she wasn't there for a long period of time. So this is a dalil dealing with the issue of the woman upon her menses entering into the masjid for short periods of time. And now we come to another issue, or the other issue as relates to this, is whether or not it is permissible for a woman to enter into the masjid when she's on her menses, and to spend long periods of time in the masjid while she's upon her menses. And this is an issue of ikhtilaf. This is an issue by way in which there is a difference of opinion. The scholars, they differ as relates to this ruling. They differ as relates to this ruling. Those scholars who say that it is not permissible for a woman to spend long periods of time in the masjid, they do that based upon the two narrations that were aforementioned. Now, this is from the proofs and the evidences that they utilize to reach that conclusion. Okay? And it's important in that we know and understand them. So the first one is the hadith that is collected in Abu Dawood, and that is, verily I do not make it, or I do not permit the woman who is upon her menses, nor the one who's in a state of sexual impurity, to enter into the masjid. And that is from Abu Dawood. And then you have a wording that comes in Ibn Majah, and that wording is that verily the masjid, and the masjid la yuhil lil ha'id wa la junub, that verily the masjid is not permissible for the woman who is on her menses, nor for the individual who is in a state of sexual impurity. So again, I want you to have both of these narrations. I want you to have both of these narrations and write them down inside of your notes. Inni la uhil al-masjid, inni la uhil al-masjid li ha'id wa la li junub. And verily I do not allow or permit the one who's upon the menses, and nor the one who's in a state of sexual impurity, the masjid. The masjid is not, I do not permit it for them. طيب. And then the next one, then that is the hadith that comes in Ibn Majah. Na'am. إن المسجد لا يحل لحائض ولا جنوب. نعم. ولا لجنوب ولا جنوب. That the masjid is not permissible for the woman who's on her menses, nor the one who's in a state of sexual impurity. And this hadith has been collected by Imam Ibn Majah. Na'am. So I want you to have both of these hadith inside of your notes, because we're going to speak about them inshallah ta'ala a little bit, right? We're going to speak a little bit about them bithnillahi ta'ala. But before getting into that in particular, let us look at the other opinion, that opinion that says that it is okay for the woman to enter into the masjid. And then let us try to understand why they say that, and how did they come to this conclusion. How did they come to this conclusion, right? Because as far as those mashayikh who prohibit the woman on her menses from entering into the masjid and to spend long periods of time in the masjid, then we see the proofs by way in which they are basing their opinion upon, right? So let us try to understand better the other side on why is it they don't see it like that. How come other mashayikh, others from the ulama, they take a different opinion, and why? Why would they take a different opinion? Naam. Al-Allama Al-Imam Al-Albani rahmatullah alayhi, he mentions, he says, as the question, he was asked the question. Remember, we say always gotta bring the question along with the answer so that we can better understand. The Shaykh, he was asked, هل يجوز للمرأة الحائض أن تدخل المسجد? The Shaykh, he was asked, is it permissible for the woman who is upon her menses to enter into the masjid? Is that permissible? Naam. فالجواب, the answer, Imam Al-Albani, he says, يجوز لها ذلك. It is permissible for her to do that. Meaning, it is permissible for the woman who is upon her menses to enter into the masjid. It's okay for her to come to the masjid. So now, it may be wondering, or you come across a person's mind, well, why? How did the Shaykh come to this conclusion? And the Shaykh is going to explain. He says, يجوز لها ذلك بالدليل سلبي وآخر إيجابي. بدليل سلبي وآخر إيجابي. That it is permissible for the woman to enter into the masjid. One, we have one of the proofs, right, is the evidence of absence, and the other proof is a proof that is confirmed, an evidence that is confirmed. Now, I want us to truly understand this first one, salbi, so that we can better understand issues in general and the like, and understand a principle that Imam Al-Albani rahmatullah alayhi, he mentions. He says, وَأَمَّا دَلِيلَ السَّلْبِ, as far as the proof that is a proof due to the fact of it being the evidence of absence, right? The evidence of absence. And I really want us all to understand this term, because we may be familiar with the famous statement that the absence of evidence is not the evidence of absence, right? It's very important we understand this, so that no one is confused by what the Shaykh is mentioning. What that means is the absence of evidence is not the evidence of absence. Is that the absence of evidence could be that we don't know the evidence in that particular issue, but there is evidence in that issue, right? Again, the absence of evidence, this means what? We don't have the evidence for the issue, or we don't know the evidence of an issue, or those who are indulged in speaking about such an affair, they don't know the evidence. But that does not mean that there is no evidence, just they don't know it. But there may be evidence somewhere else. Okay? I'm saying that to say that this situation is not that. This is not what the Shaykh means. But rather the Shaykh means that this is actually the evidence of absence. Why? Because in this particular issue, and the Shaykh is going to mention, there is no evidence that can be relied upon. There is no evidence that can be relied upon. So therefore, one point when we look at this issue is that we have the evidence of absence. Now, we have the evidence of absence. But the Shaykh, he says, and inshallah ta'ala we may understand a little better. The Shaykh, he says, Imam Al-Albani, he says, وَأَمَّا الدَّلِيلِ السَّلْبِ, as far as the proof which is the evidence of absence, he says, فَهُوَ عَدَمُ الْوُجُودِ الدَّلِيلِ الْمَانِعِ لَهَا مِنْ دُخُولِ الْمَسْجِدِ. He said, because there is no proof and evidence, there's no evidence that prevents the woman who's on her menses to enter into the masjid. There's no proof. Shaykh Al-Bani is saying there's no proof that will prevent the woman from entering into the masjid. Okay? He says, وَهَذَا يَتَمَشِّي مَعَ الْقَاعِدَةِ الْأُصُولِيَّةِ الَّتِي تَقُولُ إِنَّ الْأَصْلَ فِي الْأَشْيَاءِ الْإِبَاحَةِ, that verily the origin of things is what? Is a permissibility. The origin of things is that there is a permissibility. This is a principle from the Sharia. This is a principle from the Sharia. Okay? That the origin of things is permissible. The origin of things is that is permissible. And I'm sure we may have heard this before, especially when it's connected to those things that are from the dunya. Right? Especially when it's connected to those things that are from the worldly affair. Then we know that the origin is that it's permissible. Unless there comes a dalil specific saying that particular thing is not permissible. But other than that, then what? Then it's permissible unless it's a dalil that says otherwise. So this is what the Shaykh is mentioning here. He's saying that we have this principle that the origin of things is that they are permissible, unless there comes a text which makes that thing impermissible. Okay? The Shaykh, he says, وَالْمَنْعَ مِنْ شَيْءٍ, and to prohibit someone from something, right? يَتَطَلَّبُ دَلِيلًا خَاصًا, and to say that something is impermissible, then we have to have a clear text which negates it. We have to have a text which is specific to that particular affair, showing us that that thing is haram. Okay? And as a side note, a person, he may ask, that sounds okay, good. I see what the Shaykh is saying, that the origin of things they are permissible, unless there comes a text specifically about that thing saying that that thing is impermissible. Okay? A person may say that sounds good, but where do the ulama get that principle from? What's the proof for that principle? Right? And I'm saying this to say, and so I to reiterate a very important statement by the Allama Imam Uthaymeen rahmatullah alayhi, and that is that he mentioned, paraphrasing, that the speech of the scholars is not proof. Let me say that again. The speech of the scholars is not proof. So if a person asks you what's the proof, you can't say Sheikh so-and-so said. That's not proof. Sheikh so-and-so said is not proof. Now, no matter who he may be, no matter who that Sheikh is, it's not proof. Shaykh Uthaymeen, he said that the statements of the scholars are not proof, but rather they require proof. The statements of the scholars, they require proof. Now, and I really want to stress this because we're seeing a very unfortunate, a very unfortunate phenomenon going on right now. And that is that many people are striving to connect the people to personalities and to Juyaanee, Sheikh so-and-so and Sheikh so-and-so, Sheikh Fulan or Sheikh Alan, and so on and so forth. And when you ask them, well, why is it like this? They say, oh, Sheikh so-and-so said. But that's not a proof that Sheikh so-and-so said. Right? Is there proof for what he said? Is there dalil? Does this coincide with the way of the Salaf? That's what these are the questions we have to ask. Now, is there proof from the Qur'an and the Sunnah? Is this from the methodology of the Salaf? Is this what the Salaf they used to do? These are some of the questions we need to ask, not being disrespectful or making it seem like we don't trust in what is being transmitted. No, we trust it. But the point is that it helps if we know some dalil, if we know why they said it, and so on and so forth. Now, and of course, you'll always have instances where you may find fatwa from the mashayikh and they don't go into detail about the proofs and the evidences, and that's due to the audience. They answer in a way that's suitable to the audience, because you don't want to say something and start, bringing all these proofs and evidences and how things were extracted, understood from this proof and evidence, so on and so forth, to a people who they may go over their head, they may confuse them, right? But I want to just show here that the mashayikh, meaning of Ahlul Sunnah, of Ahlul Sunnah, alhamdulillah, when they tell us these principles are extracted from the Qur'an and the Sunnah. These are not principles that, were just invented and everyone agrees upon these principles, but these are principles that are from the book and the Sunnah. They're from the book and the Sunnah. So I'm using this so we can appreciate our scholars more, and at the same time not fall into blind following. Not fall into blind following. And if anyone wants to get some more information on this particular issue about blind following the mashayikh and so on and so forth, and how this is not from Salafiyah, then I remind them to look into the introduction to the Prophet's prayer described by Imam Al-Albani, and look at all the statements he brought from the four Imams as relates to following the text and not blind following the person, connecting yourself to the Qur'an and to the Sunnah. and not blind following the transmitter of it, right? Because as Imam Malik said, yani everyone yu'khad minhu wa yurad, everyone you can take from him and then you can reject it, except for who? Illa sahib hadha al-qabr, except for the one who was buried in his grave, and he pointed to the grave of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Naam. So ala kulli hal, so we can have some more appreciation for this principle that everything, when from the worldly affairs and so on and so forth, then it is permissible unless we have a proof and evidences that says that it is impermissible. Okay? What's the proof of that? The proof of that is, or could be found in Surah Baqarah. Can be found in Surah Al-Baqarah, and it's verse 29. Verse 29. Now, so what's the proof for this principle? Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 29. And that is Allah Ta'ala's statement, هُوَ الَّذِي خَلَقَ لَكُمْ مَا فِي الْأَرْضِ جَمِيعًا. And that He, meaning He, Allah, is the one who has created for you everything that is in the earth. Now, He is the one who has created for you that which is in the earth, everything. But the shahid is that Allah Ta'ala, He says, lakum, for you. That those things that are in the earth have been created for you to what? To utilize them. To utilize them, to use them. And this is how the ulama, they say that what? That the origin of the affair is that everything is permissible. That's the origin, is that it's permissible. Unless there comes a text showing us that that particular thing is not permissible. Because Allah Ta'ala says that He made for us so that we can utilize what? He created for us so that we can utilize what? Everything that's in the earth. So whatever's in the earth, the origin, we can use it. Unless there comes a text to say, but that thing, no. You understand? So when it comes to the meat, we know we can eat from the meat except for pork, except for those things that have died on their own, so on and so forth. Now, things that are slaughtered upon, to a false deity, we can't eat that, and so on and so forth. Now, but we know from drinks, right? All of the drinks are halal for us, from mango juice and apple juice and water and coffee and tea and whatever, right? These things are okay. But when it comes to certain drinks, like alcoholic beverages, okay, well now these things are haram, because alcohol is haram, right? But outside of what we have a text to state that something is haram, then what? Then everything else is permissible. So a person doesn't have to come and ask, well, what's the dalil that I can drink orange juice? What do you mean what's the dalil? You can drink orange juice, it's permissible. Unless you have a dalil that says you can't drink orange juice, then that's different, right? But the origin is that it's okay, you can drink orange juice, it's permissible. There's nothing saying you can't drink it. That makes sense? That makes sense? Inshallah ta'ala. Tayyib. So again, this is Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 29. This is a proof for this principle that we hear a lot. We hear this principle a lot. So it's good that we become familiar with where this principle is extracted from. Where this principle is extracted from. And it's extracted from this ayah. So the Shaykh, he says, so as far as the woman entering into the masjid when she's upon her menses, then there's no dalil that says she can't do it. There's no dalil that makes it haram for her to go into the masjid when she's on her menses. Now, so a person, he may say, but wait, didn't you just mention a little while ago 2 hadith? Didn't you just mention a little while ago 2 hadith? Now, Shaykh Al-Bani, he says what? He says, وَلَمْ يَصِحْ مُطْلَقًا أي حديث فيه منع المرأة الحائض من دخول المسجد. Imam Al-Albani rahmatullah alayh, he says that there is absolutely, or he says that they are not authentic, right? Any hadith that states the impermissibility or the barring of a woman from entering to the masjid, then they are not authentic whatsoever. They are not authentic whatsoever. So Imam Al-Albani is hinting to the fact that yes, he's aware of certain ahadith that come specifically prohibiting the woman on her menses from entering into the masjid. But the Shaykh is saying that all of these narrations that specifically prohibit the woman from entering into the masjid, they are all unauthentic. They're all weak narrations and cannot be used as a proof. They're weak narrations and cannot be used as a proof. So let us look back now. The hadith from Abu Dawood, and also the hadith from Ibn Majah. And also the hadith from Ibn Majah. You will see that the chain of these ahadith, and the chain of these ahadith, as they are on the authority an Aflat bin Khalifa Al-Amiri, right? And I want you to write his name down. I want you to write his name down. On the authority of Aflat bin Khalifa Al-Amiri. I want you to write that name down. Again, that name is Aflat bin Khalifa Al-Amiri. I want you to write that name down. Imam Abu Dawood, he also mentions that Aflat was also called Fulayt, right? He was also called Fulayt. So his name was Aflat, and he was also called Fulayt. Right? So it was on the authority of you have Aflat bin Khalifa Al-Amiri and Jasra bin Dijaja, on the authority of Jasra, Jas, Jim, Sin, Ra, Ta Marbuta, on the authority of Jasra bin Dijaja, Afwan, Bint, Bint. So it's Jasra bint Dijaja. Right? I want you to write her name down too. Jasra bint Dijaja. Right? Who narrated an Aisha radiyallahu ta'ala anha. Okay? These two individuals that were mentioned, Aflat, or some say Fulayt bin Khalifa Al-Amiri, his being in the chain is problematic, because as the ulama of hadith they mentioned, huwa majhul, he is unknown. So because he is unknown, these are from the things that will make a narration unauthentic. These are from the things that will make a narration weak. If inside of the chain you have individuals who are not known, they're not known. So this will mean this will be from those things that make a hadith da'if. Okay? But also, fi isnadihi Jasra bint Dijaja. You also have Jasra also in the hadith. So as far as Aflat, we know he is unknown. So put unknown. As far as Jasra bint Dijaja, qala Imam Al-Bukhari, he didn't accept her narrations. Right? He said, عندها عجائب. He says that she has some very strange statements. She has some very strange things. And others from the ulama, they explain what was intended by Imam Al-Bukhari is that she used to confuse hadith. She used to confuse hadith. So she's not reliable as a transmitter. So in this chain already, you got two individuals who are problematic inside of this chain, in the chains of these ahadith that are problematic, that due to their presence inside of the chains of hadith, then this hadith is going to be da'if. It's not going to be acceptable. It's not going to be acceptable. And for this reason, ضعف هذا الحديث جماعة من أهل الحديث. That for this reason, there has been a group from the people of knowledge, from the people of hadith, those scholars of hadith, that have graded this hadith as being weak, unauthentic. Have graded this hadith as being unauthentic. From them was Al-Bayhaqi wa Ibn Hazm. From them was the great Imams, Imam Al-Bayhaqi wa Imam Ibn Hazm. وقال Ibn Hazm, and Imam Ibn Hazm, he said, إنه باطل, that this hadith is erroneous. It's erroneous. It cannot be used as a proof or evidence because it is not sound. Imam Ibn Hazm, he said this hadith is batil. So those two hadith that were mentioned, that have these two individuals inside of the chain, then those chains are unauthentic. Those chains, they are unauthentic. Due to the presence of them. And also Imam Al-Albani, he graded these narrations also as being unauthentic. He graded these narrations as being also weak. So if a hadith is weak, then what? It can't be used as a proof and evidence. So this is why Imam Al-Albani is saying you have the evidence of absence, because in this issue there is no evidence that could be relied on that says the woman cannot go to the masjid when she's on her menses. We have no dalil to prevent her. We have no dalil, right? That's from one standpoint. From another standpoint, Imam Al-Albani says, وَأَمَّا الدَّلِيلِ الْإِجَابِ, but as far as the proof that is the evidence which is confirmed, then we do have evidence that speak other than that give us the understanding that a woman could enter the masjid when she is upon her menses. And Imam Al-Albani, he says, فَهُوَ حَدِيث عَائِشَةَ رَضِيَ اللَّهُ تَعَالَى عَنْهَا فِي الصَّحِيحِ الْبُخَارِ. It is the hadith of our mother Aisha that has been collected by Imam Al-Bukhari. من حديث جابر بن عبد الله الأنصاري, from the narration of Jabir bin Abdullah al-Ansari radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, أنها لما حاضت في حجة الوداع, is that our mother Aisha, when she got her menses during the farewell pilgrimage, وكان النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قد نزل في مكان قريب من مكة اسمه صرف, and that the Prophet ﷺ, they had stopped, right? They had stopped from the journey. They had stopped off, and at a place that was near unto Mecca. It was near unto Mecca. And then فلما دخل عليها رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم وجدها تبكي. And when the Prophet ﷺ, he entered the room, he entered the house, he found, where they were staying at, he saw that she was crying. When he entered upon her, he saw she was crying. فقال لها صلى الله عليه وسلم, so the Prophet ﷺ, he said unto her, مالك, what's the matter? What's the matter? Anafist? Did you get your menses? Did you get your menses? And our mother Aisha replied in the affirmative that she had gotten her menses. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, هذا أمر كتبه الله على بنات آدم. He said, this is an affair that Allah has written upon the daughters of Adam. فاصنعي ما يصنع الحاج غير أن تطوفي ولا تصلي. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, do everything that the pilgrim does. Do everything that the one performing Hajj does. Except do not make tawaf. In tawaf, that's what? When we go around the Kaaba. When we go around the Kaaba. Do not make tawaf and do not pray. Do not make tawaf and do not pray. Why? Because these two things require you have to be in a state of wudu and to do them. These things require, these two, you have to be in wudu to do them. Right? Shaykh Albani, he says, فَهَذَا النَّص, this text, بأنه يجوز للمرأة الحائض أن تدخل المسجد. He said this text here is a proof that it is permissible for the woman who's on her menses to enter into the masjid. It's permissible for her. Due to what? This hadith. Right? So a person, he may say, wait, how? How is that a proof? Remember, Hajj. When you go to Hajj, right? Right. You have to enter into the masjid. Correct? Those people who are upon Hajj, they enter into the masjid. So the Shaykh, he says that it is permissible. This text shows that it's not only permissible for a woman to enter into the masjid, but it is also a text showing us that it is permissible for a woman to enter into Masjid al-Haram. And when we say woman, we mean a woman who's on her menses. For the woman who is on her menses, it's permissible for her to enter into the masjid. Rather, it's permissible for her to enter into Masjid al-Haram, the Haram. She can enter into it. Naam, she can enter into the masjid, as we see for this hadith. Because he said that ذلك أن النبي عليه الصلاة والسلام قد أباح لها أن تصنع ما يصنع الحاج, is that the Prophet ﷺ told her that it is permissible, or this hadith shows that the Prophet ﷺ, he said that it is permissible, it is okay for her to do those things which the one who is making Hajj does. Right? And when a person, he makes Hajj, what are some of the things that they do? What? They go into the masjid. من دخول المسجد ومن طواف ومن صلاة. Naam. They enter into the masjid. They make tawaf. They go around the Kaaba. They pray. They read the Qur'an. So on and so forth. All of these things is from what the people on Hajj, they do. Naam. كل ذلك يفعله الحاج. Everyone who is on Hajj, is what they do. They do these things. Naam. But what did the Prophet ﷺ excuse from these things? What were the exceptions? The exception from all those things, which include but are not limited to reading the Qur'an, entering into the masjid, right? Making dua, praying, making tawaf around the Kaaba, so on and so forth. All of these things are from the things that people who are upon Hajj, they do. So the Prophet ﷺ, he said, from these list of things which were listed, but it is not limited to what was mentioned, from what the people on Hajj do, you can do everything that they do, except you cannot make tawaf around the Kaaba, and you cannot pray. Everything else that the people on Hajj do, you can do it, except for the salah, and except for what? The prayer. Or except for the tawaf, and except for the prayer. Right? These are the two things you can't do. Which means that what? Everything else that the one who is on Hajj does, from going inside the masjid, from reading from the Qur'an, so on and so forth, then you can do it. You can do it. And this hadith here is showing us that it's okay. But yeah. The Shaykh, he says, فَالْحَائِضُ إِذًا تَدْخُلُ الْمَسْجِدِ. He says, so therefore the woman who is on her menses, she can enter into the masjid, وَأَن تَقْرَأَ الْمُصْحَفِ, and she can read from the mushaf. The Shaykh, he says, وَمَنْ يَدَّعِي خِلَافَ ذَلِكَ. He said, and whoever asserts opposition to this, or whoever asserts an opinion contrary to this, the Shaykh, he says, فَعَلَيْهِ أَنْ يُثْبِتَ الدَّلِيلِ الْمُحَرِّمِ. He said, then he has to produce an evidence that will prevent such. They will have to produce an evidence which would prohibit the woman from doing such, i.e. entering into the masjid and reading from the Qur'an. You have to produce an evidence that is clear. The Shaykh says, وَأَنْ يَثْبُتَ أَنَّ هَذَا التَّحْرِيمِ. And I want you to understand this as well. It's very, very important. From one standpoint, the Shaykh, he says that you have to bring a dalil that says she cannot enter into the masjid. That's one, right? You have to have that dalil. The second is that what Shaykh Abadi, he mentions, وَأَنْ يَثْبُتَ أَنَّ هَذَا التَّحْرِيمِ كَانَ بَعْدَ هَذَا التَّحْلِيلِ. He says, and you have to make it clear, right, that the prohibition of those who say it's prohibited, that this text that comes stating a prohibition, then you have to make it clear and confirm that this prohibition came after the allowance for the woman to enter into the masjid. Because, for argument's sake, even if there were hadith that were authentic that that prohibit the woman from entering into the masjid, it will have to be confirmed that these hadith came after the Prophet ﷺ allowed Aisha radiyallahu ta'ala anha to enter into the Masjid al-Haram, and she was on her menses. Because then it will what? It will abrogate that which came before it. The ruling would have been abrogated. But this is not the case where, one, there is a hadith that is authentic, and two, even if there were, it will have to be proved that this hadith which bars her from entering into the masjid came after, was said after the final pilgrimage or the farewell pilgrimage, where the Prophet ﷺ allowed the woman upon the menses to enter into the masjid. To enter into the masjid. But yeah. And the issue is that these individuals who are upon the menses and so on and so forth, they are incapable of going into a state of wudu. It's not possible for them to go into a state of wudu because they're inside, or because they're on their menses. And that those scholars who say, reading the Qur'an and so on and so forth, they stipulate that you have to be in a state of ablution in order to do these things. But as aforementioned in last week's class, and also here, there is no proof that substantiates that you have to be in wudu to read the Qur'an. Now, there's no proof that says that. So thus, the woman who's on her menses, she can enter into the masjid and she can read from the Qur'an. Why? Because one, there is no evidence that says she can't do it. And then we have evidence that points to the fact that she could do it, number two. Now, if that makes sense. But yeah. So these are things that she is allowed to do. So the woman who's on her menses, she's allowed to come to the masjid and to benefit and to read the Qur'an and to touch it. Now, the ulama, they mention as an advice, however, it is incumbent that the women who are upon their menses, they make sure that they utilize some type of protection that will prevent anything from the blood of the menses from touching the floor of the masjid. From touching the floor of the masjid. So they will have to use the female napkins, and that so as to make sure, or that which is equivalent to it, and that which will produce the same effect, so as to ensure that nothing from the menstrual blood reaches the floor of the masjid. So they will have to make sure and be very careful to make sure that they're using the sanitary napkins and so on and so forth, so that nothing from the blood reaches the floor of the masjid. Now what about making dhikr? Right? What about making dhikr? Saying La ilaha illallah, Allahu Akbar, Subhanallah. What about making dhikr, making dua and ad'iyah? And what about reading from the books of knowledge, whether it be tafsir or hadith or seerah or whatever the case may be? Fiqh. Is the woman on her menses, is she allowed to do these things? Is she allowed to do these things? Shaykh Fawzan, he says, وَلَا بَأْسْ أَن تَأْتِي الْحَائِضُ بِأَذْكَارِ الشَّرْعِيَّةِ بِالْأَذْكَارِ الشَّرِيعَةِ. He says that is no problem for a woman who's on her menses to come with the legislated supplications. She could come with the legislated supplications. من التهليل, from saying La ilaha illallah wa takbir, and from saying Allahu Akbar, and from saying and from the tasbih, from saying Subhanallah wa ad'iyah, and ta'ti bil awrad نعم بأوراد الشرعية المشروعة في الصباح والمساء وعند النوم والاستيقاظ, is that, and it's also permissible for her to say those supplications that are legislated, those supplications from the Sharia, and those that are legislated, like the morning supplications and the supplications in the evening time and the supplications before going to bed and the supplications upon waking up. It's permissible for her to do all of this. It's fine. The woman who's on her menses, she can do all of this. And likewise, a woman who's postpartum bleeding, she can do all of this. ولا بأس أن تقرأ في كتب العلم, and it's also no problem for her to read from the books of knowledge. It's no problem for her to read from the books of knowledge, كالتفسير, like the books dealing with the tafsir, يعني كتب علم تفسير. Now, the books of the knowledge of tafsir, يعني كالتفسير والحديث والفقه. She can read the books about tafsir, the books about fiqh, and the books about hadith. She can still read them upon her menses. So these things, it is okay. It is okay for her to do. Naam. So let us recap. As far as entering into the masjid for short periods of time while a woman is on her menses, then we know what? There is no proof or saying she can't do it, but rather we have a proof where it was done. Where our mother Aisha, she entered into the masjid for a short period of time, and that's when she went to retrieve the mat or get the mat for the Prophet ﷺ, to go and get it for him. So this is a dalil of a woman being on her menses, going into the masjid and not staying there for long periods of time. This is fine, no problem. The other issue is whether or not she can stay there for long periods of time. Whether or not she could stay there for long periods of time. Some of the scholars, they say no, she's not allowed. And they use the proofs and the evidences, those narrations that were collected by Imam Abu Dawood, and those narrations that were collected by Imam Ibn Majah. But we had mentioned that these narrations, they are unauthentic. They are not authentic, they are weak. And that is because of the individuals who were mentioned, Aflat bin Khalifa al-Amiri and Jasra bint Dijaja. Naam. So with that being the case, and due to the fact that there is no authentic evidence that prohibits them from entering into the masjid, then they are allowed to enter into the masjid when they are upon their menses. Also, we have the hadith of Aisha radiyallahu ta'ala anha, that is a clear proof of the allowance of a woman to enter into the masjid. So we have a proof that allows a woman who's on her menses to enter into the masjid for determined or periods of time, right? And on the flip side, there is nothing that is authentic that prohibits her from doing it. So a woman on her menses, she could enter into the masjid. And also, a woman who's on her menses, she can also read through the books of Islamic knowledge and the various subjects. She can read through all of them while she's on her menses. And she can make dua and she can make dhikr when she's on her menses. She can make dua and she can make dhikr when she is upon her menses. Now, and likewise for the woman who is postpartum bleeding, then all what was mentioned is also applicable to her. Now, and this is very important that we know and that we understand the likes of these things, so that we know, and in particular the sisters know what they can and can't do when they are upon their menses. And then the Shaykh Hafidhullah Ta'ala, he gets into another benefit, and that is speaking about some of the discharge and how that is to be understood. However, we will leave that into the next class بإذن الله تعالى. فنكتفي بهذا القدر، وصلى الله وسلم على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين.